This is the Palin Update on Mama Grizzly Radio. I'm Kevin Schola in the 3D Security and Training Academy studios.
They even blame sporting goods stores that sell arms, accusing them of being an accomplice. Gun stores are an accomplice to crime, and that fork made me fat.
In only a way Governor Palin could, she brilliantly points out the hypocrisy of the gun grabbers and anti-Second Amendment politicians. Lately, stories involving guns have been all over the news, but this topic is quite different. There's a misguided attack on our law enforcement from liberals, media, and race baiters. A man who has always fought for our right to bear arms and has supported the NRA and gun rights with the same passion as Sarah Palin is here. Sheriff David Clarke of Milwaukee, like Sarah Palin, has also been under fire for his comments on guns in the past, and now he's speaking out on the situation in Ferguson, Missouri. We're honored to welcome Sheriff Clarke back to the show today. Sarah Palin heads to Texas to trim some pork, literally. Palin blasts the pathetic Obama-Boehner Cromnibus bill. A brand new Commonwealth Common Sense with Susan Simpson is coming up from Virginia. And just ahead, we'll head to Missouri for our latest edition of Steel Resolve with Sarah Steelman. Welcome to the Palin Update on Mama Grizzly Radio. The Palin Update is sponsored by 3D Security and Training Academy. Learn more at 3dsta.com. Right now, we say hello to our friend Sheriff David Clarke. He is the 64th Sheriff of Milwaukee County, a staunch defender of our Second Amendment, and a great common-sense man of law enforcement. Sheriff Clarke, welcome back to our program.
It's my pleasure to be on with you.
Great to have you here again. You've been such a voice for not only your state of Wisconsin, but for all Americans. Last time we spoke to you, it was about your common-sense PSA advising families to protect themselves, and that caused an uproar from liberal gun grabbers. Now you've hit national headlines again, and I'm so glad you did, and so many friends in law enforcement have voiced their appreciation for what you've been saying about Ferguson, Missouri, the protests, and what has led to them. First, what are your thoughts in general about the Ferguson decision regarding Officer Darren Wilson and the reaction from people who have looted and rioted?
Well, from what I understand, once the grand jury finished and some of the testimony was released, I think it was the right decision. Look, it's a tragedy anytime an officer is forced to use any kind of force, but specifically deadly force, and somebody dies as a result. But the fact is that Mike Brown was on a path that was leading him to a very dark place, okay? We all know about the confrontation that he had in that convenience store where he bullied that attendant there and stole some items. And he walked out of there with a chip on his shoulder, and it carried over to a confrontation with a Ferguson police officer who, simply just told him to get out of the roadway. The roadway is made for cars. It's for his own safety. And he didn't like that. This is a guy who couldn't deal with authority, has never been made to deal with authority in his lifetime, and he was up against somebody who was not going to back down, and that's what I think is the unfortunate thing. But what we're talking about in the case of Mike Brown is a lifestyle choice, okay? He chose thug life. And that's unfortunate, but that's what happened. Like I said, he didn't deserve to die, but he was a co-conspirator in his own demise.
And as far as what's been going on, the media paints it always as peaceful protests. I mean, they didn't do that the first night. Obviously, they showed some of the burning police cruisers and things of that nature. But you know how things get tampered down sometime from the media to show what they want to show. What do you think of what's gone on in Ferguson and also in other cities across the country with people laying in the roads? And, this is a great country where we get to, voice our opinions on things. But there's also, some misguided efforts here, too.
Sure, and I guess since we haven't had any real protests in this country of this magnitude, there was the Occupy movement, and then there's the G8 summit that was here. But other than that, maybe they are out of practice in terms of what peaceful protest is. Protest is a great thing in this country. All right, First Amendment protected. We all love that. But what's going on here is faux protests. All right, these are anarchists who have moved in, seized this issue away from well-intentioned and well-meaning protesters over some things that they think they have a grievance for, and that's fine. That's what a democracy is all about. But these anarchists have seized this and exploited it for their own purpose. We know how anarchists feel about the police. When I see some of the demonstrations going on in the Bay Area, I saw some in Boston, I believe it was, is starting to turn violent toward the police. That's their main objective, all right, with an anarchist. They're anti-government, anti-authority. The police are the most visible and touchable symbol of authority in the United States of America. But I expect the police department to stand strong on the side of law and order. I've made it very clear in Milwaukee here, and we've had those protests here in Milwaukee, and we're dealing with a police shooting ourselves, with which there'll be a decision soon. I've made it clear, law and order will prevail, and that arrests will be made for violations of the law. Look, when you ask me, one person's exercise of their constitutional rights can infringe on another person's ability to exercise their constitutional right as well. The rights of non-protesters have to be protected too. So when I see some of these demonstrations start to infringe on other people's rights to use public access ways like roadways, to use public spaces, public buildings like courthouses and municipal buildings, well, then they're infringing on other law-abiding people's rights to use those things as well. So, it's my position, based on the law and the rule of law, that you don't have a right to shut down the business of government. You have a right to protest, but you don't have a right to shut down the business of government. I expect the police to be assertive, at least in my agency. I don't run these other agencies in the United States, but, from what I'm watching, they're trying to walk on eggshells. They're trying to tiptoe around this thing, and it is a delicate situation, but at the same time, law-abiding people got to be watching this, the rule of law and order be pushed around, and it's got to be very unsettling for them.
Where do you feel race relations are right now in this country, and how much of the onus should be on Barack Obama?
Well, just in the last 2 weeks, that ugly wound has been reopened, and I think that the President of the United States, unfortunately, and Eric Holder, two of the top office holders in the United States, contributed to the opening of that wound. Race relations in the United States, have always been tenuous at best, but they've improved, all right, and they've been improving steadily. And we've moved forward as a nation. We've gotten past the ugly sin of slavery. I made my peace with America, and I decided to surrender myself to America, join the mainstream, and participate in all that it has to offer, all that this great country has to offer. And in order to do that, you have to join the mainstream, and you have to, leave some of that baggage behind. The baggage that the sin of slavery left on this country. I didn't say forget about it, but you got to find forgiveness in your heart. I mean, the God that I pray to asked me to do that. He doesn't ask me to forget, but he asks me to forgive. And, I've done that with America. And so I think that white society ought to be given credit for the great strides that they've made in opening up this country and everything it has to offer to everybody, including me. I think I'm living testament of that, of what can be achieved through hard work, through self-discipline, through self-motivation, self-determination, self-actualization, and the ability to overcome obstacles. Of course it's tough, and life isn't always fair. I don't have this Pollyannish view of the United States of America, but I also see what's possible, and I also have the strong will, and I try to demonstrate that for other people. I'm a role model in the Milwaukee area, and I tell young people, keep your chin up, keep working, embrace education, and choose healthy lifestyle choices. And what I mean by that is stay away from drug and alcohol abuse, stay away from gang activity, stay away from criminal activity, and fatal decisions like dropping out of school early. So, we are where we are right now, but what's called for is leadership out of the President of the United States when it comes to race relations. The President can't take sides. The President has to choose his words carefully. He knows that. And instead, he has made it clear, even if it's through some subliminal language, or some code language, I should say, that, he's picked a particular side. When he makes a statement that the police are badly trained and that the police have this fear of people that don't look like them, I was disgusted and appalled by that language. I've been in this profession for 37 years. Are we perfect? Not by any stretch of the imagination. Far from it, as a matter of fact. But our law enforcement officers are the best that our communities have to offer. We put our best foot forward when we put these uniforms on, risk our lives, and go out in service of our community. And we ought to be extolled. And our law enforcement, the people on the front line, the men and women, they ought to be extolled for that by the President of the United States and the Attorney General. and instead they were thrown under the bus. They're used as a whipping post, and I'm going to continue to fight back in defense of our men and women on the front lines in these communities.
Well, what does it say when you have a president that takes advice from a man like Al Sharpton?
Doesn't say very much. I said I would question the judgment of anybody who would take advice from a race hustler like Al Sharpton. Look, Al Sharpton is a charlatan, okay? He's a blowhard. He exploits situation. He's a race provocateur. He engages in race politics. He's a very negative, divisive individual. And why would the President of the United States or Eric Holder or even Mayor de Blasio in New York cater this guy and give him the time of day? It's that kind of divisive figure that makes other people on the outside, good law-abiding people who are just watching us from afar, begin to wonder whose side our government is on.